Hello, I'm Matthew McKibbin. Welcome to Bedtime Stories. Thank you for enjoying my previous bedtime story video. I hope it helped you all have sweet dreams and other stuff. So today I'm back with another bedtime story video, and I'm gonna read to you guys more stories of Thomas the Tank Engine. And we're gonna start off with The Monster Under the Shed. It was a dark, blistery evening at the station. Sir Topham had to close the railway early on account of the weather. The engines were waiting for the signal to return to their sheds. Maybe one of us should tell a story to pass the time, Thomas suggested. The other engines looked pleased with Thomas's idea. I have the perfect story for tonight, James volunteered with a sly grin. A long time ago, James began, there was a brave Blue Engine who was always eager to help. Blue Engine, the station master asked one night, "Would you go to the end of the tracks to pick up a coach that was left behind?" "Of course," the brave, eager engine replied, and he set out into the dark, foggy night. But by the time the little Blue Engine reached the end of the tracks, the fog was so thick he could hardly see anything. "I'll just have to wait until morning," said the engine to himself, and he settled into an old shed for the night. Late that night, the little Blue Engine awoke to a noise coming from below the shed. Creak! He opened his eyes and saw long fingers reaching for him through the floorboards. There was a monster under the shed. Terrified, the little Blue Engine raced out of the shed with the horrible engine-eating monster chasing him through the fog. Then what happened? Percy asked dimly. "That's where the story ends," said James. No one ever heard from that little Blue Engine again. "What about the monster?" Percy whispered. "Don't be silly, Percy," Gordon said with a chuckle. "It's just a story." "What if that story is true?" Percy asked Thomas on their way to the sheds. "What if the engine-eating monster is out there somewhere right now?" "Stop being such a scaredy cat, Percy," Thomas answered. "There are no such things as monsters." Later that night, after they settled in for bed, the engines were startled by a terrible racket coming from Percy's shed. "Gordon!" "Thomas, help! There's a monster in my shed," wailed Percy. Suddenly, James appeared, roaring with laughter. He had been rattling some scrap metal behind the sheds to frighten Percy. "I'm a monster! I'm a monster!" James shouted. Percy was embarrassed for making such a fuss. "It's okay, Percy," said Henry. "Sometimes good imaginations think bad thoughts." Later that night, Thomas woke with a fright. He heard a strange noise. "Scratch, scratch! Stop it, James!" Thomas yelled, but James was sound asleep. "Scratch, scratch!" "If it's not James, then maybe I really do have a monster under my shed," thought Thomas, and he stayed awake all night just to be safe. Thomas was awfully tired when he met Percy at the docks the next morning. "Did you hear any other strange noises in your shed last night? Thomas asked. Not after James's silly prank, Percy replied. Now, Thomas felt silly himself for staying awake all night. By the middle of the day, Thomas was very sleepy and running far behind schedule. Henry pulled up beside him. You look as if you could use some special coal, said Henry. Oh, I'm just a little tired, Thomas answered. He didn't want anyone to know that he'd been too frightened to sleep. Just then, James sped by on the express track. What's the matter, Thomas? He called. Monsters keeping you up at night? And James disappeared down the track, laughing loudly. By the end of the day, Thomas barely had enough steam to make it back to the yard. The other engines were telling stories again, but Thomas headed straight to bed. Sometime that night, Thomas woke with a fright. Scratch, scratch! The noises were back, and they were definitely coming from under the shed. Who's there? Thomas whispered into the dark. Creak, creak, came the answer. Go away, monster, get out! Thomas ordered as he closed his eyes tight. Thump, 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 thump. The noise was getting louder and closer. That will surely wake the other engines, Thomas said to himself. They'll save me from the monster, but the other engines didn't stir. Dump, dump, it's just outside the door, Thomas yelled. There it's head. Help, Gordon, Thomas whispered, but only the monster heard him. Dump, 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 dump. Then the doors of Thomas's shed began to rattle on their hinges. Bang, 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 bang. It's trying to get in, thought Thomas. Then suddenly the bang stopped. Thomas was too frightened to move. He peered out into the dark, and there he was. There it was, the horrible engine-eating monster. Thomas could see its eyes glowing in the dark. Thomas clammed his own eyes shut and screamed. Gordon, Henry, Percy, James, he cried. Save me from the monster! Thomas, Gordon said, laughing. Open your eyes. What are you laughing at, Gordon? Snapped Thomas. There's a monster right outside my shed. Not anymore, Gordon replied. Now the monster is inside your shed. Thomas opened one eye very slowly. A hedgehog? Thomas yelled in surprise. I was afraid of a tiny little hedgehog? Now the engines all laughed and Thomas laughed with them. Percy has a good imagination, Thomas, but I think yours is even better, said Gordon with a little chuckle. I think you're right, agreed Thomas. It's the only thing in the world that could turn a tiny hedgehog into a big, scary monster. Lost at Sea. It was a beautiful day on the island of Sodor, and Thomas was very busy. A new search and rescue center was being built, and there was a lot of work to do. The rescue center would be a place to help people in trouble, plus Harold would have a new landing pad. Captain would get a dock, and Rocky would finally get his own shed. The search and rescue center will be made of the strongest wood of all. Jobby wood, said Sir Topham Hatt. It will arrive today at Brenham Docks. Diesel wanted to show off and move all the Joby wood by himself, but when he did, the flatbeds holding the wood skipped off the track and over a steep cliff. Thomas saved Diesel, but all the wood splashed into the ocean below. As a reward, Thomas was given the job of going to the mainland to get more Joby wood. But the next day, the dock manager told him there was no room on the steamboat. Then Thomas saw a raft. The ship could pull me on that, Thomas puffed. The engines whistled and wished farewell to Thomas. He peeped goodbye to them. Then with a long, low hoot of its horn, the big steamboat set out to sea, pulling Thomas on the raft. Thomas was far out at sea when darkness started to fall. Suddenly he heard a creak and felt the raft lurch. Frizzling fireboxes, he peeped. The chain to be the steamboat has snapped. Nobody heard Thomas whistle and peep for help as the steamboat chugged away. Waves rocked the raft, mist gathered around him. Thomas was alone and very, very worried. How will I get home? Thomas wondered. The next morning, Thomas found himself on a strange island. It was misty and quiet, and he didn't see any other engines. There must be a big dock and some ships, he said to himself. If I find them, I can sail back to Sodor. Thomas searched all over the island. He found many twisty tracks and thick, scratchy bushes. There was even a tunnel through an old fallen tree, but he didn't find a dock or anyone who could help him. Meanwhile, on Sodor, Sir Topham had learned that Thomas was missing. Everyone stopped working on the search and rescue center and started looking for their lost friend. Sir Topham Hatt and Captain raced out to sea. The engines searched all over Sodor, and Harold took to the sky. Thomas was beginning to worry that he wouldn't find anyone to help him when he met three engines named Bash, Dash, and Ferdinand. They worked in an old logging camp. "We're the logging locos," puffed Dash. "You're on Misty Island," puffed Bash. Then Thomas made an incredible discovery. Bumpers and buffers. These are Joby logs. That's the wood we need to build the Soldier Search and Rescue Center. Thomas told the logging locos about the rescue center. They agreed to help him load the wood. But Bash, Dash, and Ferdinand liked playing games more than they liked loading logs. And they really loved bouncing on the wibbly-wobbly, shake bridge. Thomas definitely did not enjoy bouncing on the bridge. Oh, Wheezy! The giant log loader wasn't much help either. He wanted to throw wood instead of stacking it. Thomas thought the work would never get done, but after a day of bickering and bashing, the jobby wood was ready to go. Now how will I get these logs back to Sodor? Thomas peeped. Luckily, Bash knew a way. Bash told Thomas about a dangerous old tunnel that connected Misty Island to Sodor. I know all about tunnels, Thomas puffed. It won't be dangerous. So pushing their flatbeds, the logging locals followed Thomas into the dark and twisty tunnel. Suddenly there was trouble. Boom! Crash! Rocks tumbled down around the engines. The tracks were blocked. Thomas and the logging locals were trapped. I feel air on my funnel, Fernando peeped. Dash spied a hole in the roof of the tunnel. Off your harness, he said to Thomas. Someone will see your steam. Thomas thought it was an excellent idea and excitedly started puffing. Back at Brenham Docks, Percy saw 3 puffs of steam in the sky. His firebox fizzed. It's Thomas! Percy peeped to Whiff. He's on Misty Island. Whiff knew about an old tunnel that led to Misty Island. Follow me, he puffed. Percy and Whiff raced through the tunnel and found the cave-in. Watch out, Thomas, Whiff puffed. Percy and I are going to push through the rocks. With that, Percy and Whiff rocked and rolled and puffed their pistons. Then they crashed through the rocks. Thomas and the logging locals were saved. Sir Topham was very happy that Thomas and his new friends were safe, and with all the new jobby wood, the rescue center would be finished in no time. Today is a special day made possible by very special engines. Sir Topham had announced at the opening of the Search and Rescue Center. All the engines peeped and Thomas's pistons puffed with pride. Thomas gets a snowplow. Early one winter morning, Thomas rolled out of the shed to check the weather. It had snowed a little each day all week. It wasn't snowing just then, but the sky was gray and threatening. Looks like we're going to have to get out of your snowplow soon, Thomas, says driver. Thomas was a really useful engine, but he did not like wearing a snowplow. No, he said with a frown. I'm fine just as I am. Besides, my branch line was clear yesterday. I don't need a snowplow. It's not even snowing. But Thomas, says driver, your snowplow would help you be really useful. Why don't you want to use it? Snowplows look silly, Thomas grumbled. The other engines will laugh at me. His driver looked up at the cloudy sky and back down at Thomas. Well, it isn't snowing yet, he said. Maybe you won't need your snowplow today after all. But you haven't used it since last winter, and we need to make sure it's still in working order. So you're going to have to try it out. All right, Thomas grumbled regretfully. When he saw the snowplow, Thomas felt like steaming away. He really didn't want to put it on, but he had agreed. So with a few turns of a screw and a few twists of a bolt, Thomas had a snowplow attached to his front. There now, says driver. It fits perfectly. Just then, James and Henry pulled out of the shed and saw Thomas. "Ha, look, Henry," said James. "Thomas is wearing a snowplow. It looks like a tin can." The two engines chuckled and chortled. "It's not even snowing. I wouldn't need a snowplow this winter," Henry said. "I'm big enough to get through plenty of snow without one." Thomas blushed and looked down. "Please take it off," he whispered to his driver. "All right," said his driver kindly, "but we may need to come back for it," he added, with another nervous glance at the sky. When Thomas started out, there was some snow on the ground, but the tracks were clear. He didn't need a snowplow at all. His first stop was at a small station by an inn. As Thomas was pulling up, it started snowing lightly. The innkeeper hurried out to unload supplies. "Mighty cold winter we're having, Thomas," he said. "I'll need these extra blankets for my guests." Beep, beep, and Thomas was off again. Thomas's next stop was at the general store, where he had a large delivery to make. "Thank you, Thomas," said the owner of the store. "With this weather, I can never have enough snow shovels, hats, and mittens. My customers will be very happy." Thomas smiled, heaved a farewell, and was on his way once more. By the time Thomas made his last stop, it was snowing hard. The trip home was very difficult. The snow was piling up on the tracks, and it was hard to see. Thomas just went steadily on, concentrating on his warm shed and the other engines waiting for him at the end of the line. "See," Thomas thought, "I can't do this without a silly snowplow." Finally, Thomas managed to get back to the sheds. Percy, James, and Henry were talking about the snow. "I've never seen it snow so hard," said Percy. Suddenly, Sir Thomas had hurried in. "Toby is stuck on his branch line," he said. "We need to go get him, or he may be out in the snow all night. And Henry, you're the biggest engine here, so you will have to do it." "But it's snowing so hard, and it is so cold," said Henry. Sir Thomas gave Henry a stern look. Henry quickly changed his mind and said, "But I am faster than Percy, James, or Thomas, and I am big enough to get through this snow without a snowplow." So Sir Thomas climbed aboard, and they were off. Thomas's driver looked with concern at the swirling snowstorm. "I'm putting on your snowplow," he said. "I have a big feeling about this snow." So with a few turns of a screw and a few twists of a bolt, Thomas had his snowplow on again. Just then the engine saw a strange sight. It was hard to tell in the thick snow, but it looked like Henry, backing up into the yard. "I couldn't make it," Henry screamed as he came closer. "The track was covered in snow. I almost got stuck. I could barely back out." Thomas thought about how the other engines had laughed at his snowplow. Then he thought about Toby having to stay out in the snow all night. "Sir, with my snowplow, I can do it," Thomas said. The snow was deep along the track, but that was no problem for Thomas's snowplow. It was still hard to see, but Thomas went slowly and carefully. Soon Thomas could tell that what looked like a mound of snow on the track ahead of him was actually Toby buried deep. Beep, beep! Toby, I'm here to help you, called Thomas. Thomas crept past Toby and switched on to the same track. He carefully backed up to Toby. His driver jumped down and hooked them together. Now pull, his driver called. Thomas pulled. He pulled as hard as he could. Slowly but surely, Toby began to move, and slowly but surely, Thomas pulled Toby through the snowstorm. Thank you, Thomas, said Toby. I would have been out in the cold all night if it weren't for you and your snowplow. I wish a snowplow would fit over my cowcatcher. So Top Hat smiled and said, Yes, Thomas, you are a really useful engine, and today you are a hero as well. Thomas beamed. For once he was happy to be wearing his snowplow. No one could see him blushing. Wow, what'd you think of that? I think the part that I like about these stories is how Thomas decided to use his snowplow after all to help rescue Toby. You know, in the model series of Thomas the Tank Engine, I did remember seeing that his snowplow got damaged because Thomas keeps banging it for the fact that he didn't want to wear it during a snow day. I'm sure that Thomas is learning a lot of things about snowplows or whatever. Thank you for tuning in to today's bedtime story video. And for what Shelley Duvall said, when you write stories, you can make believe anything. And when you dream, you can make believe anything too. So, I hope you all have sweet dreams and hope to see you next time.